Good morning. We begin in New York, where a state appellate court has handed President Donald Trump a significant legal victory, tossing out the nearly $500 million penalty in the civil fraud case brought by Attorney General Letitia James. In its ruling, the five-member panel found the financial penalty, which included $364 million in disgorgement plus interest, to be excessive and in violation of the Eighth Amendment's protection against excessive fines. However, it is crucial to note that the court did not absolve the president entirely. The judges upheld the underlying findings that Trump and his company were liable for, inflating the value of his assets to secure more favorable terms from lenders. The ruling affirms that Attorney General James acted within her authority to bring the case, and that injunctive relief against the Trump Organization was appropriate. President Trump responded to the ruling on social media, lashing out at the trial judge, Arthur Engoron, calling him incompetent and crooked. The case was originally tried without a jury before Judge Engoron, who Trump allies have long accused of bias. The split nature of the decision, with the penalty erased but liability remaining, makes it highly likely the case will proceed to New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals. Attorney General James has already confirmed her office will appeal the ruling. Adding another layer to the complex legal battle, one of the appellate judges, Justice David Friedman, issued a partial dissent. He argued that the entire case should be dismissed, writing that the Attorney General's true aim was not market hygiene, but political hygiene. With the goal of derailing President Trump's political career, he blasted the use of New York's executive law as giving the Attorney General essentially limitless power to prosecute her political enemies. This legal saga is also unfolding as the Department of Justice pursues its own investigations, including a probe into Attorney General James for alleged mortgage fraud. James has denied the claims, characterizing the federal investigation as a politically motivated revenge tour for her suit against the president. Meanwhile, the president is signaling a more aggressive federal approach to combating crime in major American cities, sparking a new clash between the White House and local Democratic leaders. Following the recent federalization of the police force in Washington, D.C., President Trump has announced that Chicago is next on his list for federal intervention and has also floated the idea of sending troops to Baltimore. In a post on his Truth Social platform, the president said that if Maryland Governor Wes Moore needs help, he would send in the troops to quickly clean up the crime. This has drawn a swift and sharp rebuke from Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, who called the president's plan for his city a flagrant violation of our Constitution. Mayor Johnson stated unequivocally that the city of Chicago does not need a military occupation. He argued that such a move would be counterproductive, potentially eroding the trust between the community and law enforcement that his administration has been working to build. Pushing back against the narrative of a city in chaos, Johnson pointed to recent statistics showing a 30% drop in homicides and a nearly 40% decrease in shootings over the past year. He said his focus is on investing in people and communities, not on military-style interventions. The mayor confirmed that he, the Illinois governor, and the Cook County Board president are in complete alignment in their opposition to the plan and are currently evaluating all legal options to protect the city from what they call unconstitutional federal overreach. The White House has fired back at the criticism. A spokesperson suggested that if Democratic leaders spent as much time solving their own city's crime problems as they did criticizing the president, their constituents would be much better off. The president's initial action in Washington, D.C. involved federalizing the city's police force under the Home Rule Act and bringing in 2,000 National Guardsmen from 6 states alongside agents from the FBI, DEA, and ATF. The administration's assertive stance also extends to the federal judiciary, where President Trump is now in a public dispute with a senior Republican senator over the confirmation process for his nominees. The president is escalating his attacks on the Senate's blue slip tradition, a century-old custom that allows a home state senator to effectively veto a judicial nominee for a federal court in their state. In a series of social media posts, President Trump called the tradition an unconstitutional hoax and a scam that gives Democrats veto power over his appointments for both federal judges and U.S. attorneys. He argued that because of this custom, his presidential appointment power has been completely taken away from me in states that have just one Democrat United States senator. This public pressure campaign is aimed squarely at Senator Chuck Grassley, a key member of the Senate Judiciary Committee who has defended the blue slip as a norm worth preserving to ensure balance and state-level input in the nomination process. The president's frustration is underscored by the slow pace of confirmations in his second term. While he successfully appointed 234 federal judges during his first term, only 5 have been confirmed in the first 7 months of his current one. The issue was recently highlighted when a federal judge ruled that Trump nominee Alina Habba had been unlawfully serving as acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. In his posts, the president urged Senator Grassley to abandon the practice and tell the Democrats, as they often tell us, to go to hell. While battles over federal appointments continue in Washington, a separate federal court ruling in Mississippi is set to reshape that state's own high court. U.S. District Judge Sherian Aycock has ordered the state of Mississippi to throw out the electoral map it uses for its Supreme Court elections. In her ruling, Judge Aycock found that the current map violates Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act. She determined that the district lines were drawn in a way that unlawfully dilutes the voting power of black voters in the state. Section 2 of the landmark 1965 law is a crucial provision that prohibits any voting practices or procedures that discriminate on the basis of race. Courts have consistently interpreted this to forbid so-called racial gerrymandering, where district boundaries are manipulated to prevent minority communities from being able to elect candidates of their choice. The judge's order explicitly prohibits Mississippi from using the current unlawful map in any future elections. The state legislature will now be required to go back to the drawing board and create a new map that complies with federal law and fairly represents all of its citizens. The ruling ensures that the future composition of Mississippi's highest court will be determined by an electoral system that a federal court has deemed fair and non-discriminatory.